Hey guys, it's been like a month or two. Anyway, space shenanigans time. This is just some dumb stuff that happened in space. Let's start out with the greatest space program of all time, the Zambian space program. In northern Rhodesia during decolonization, there's a man who's complaining about the decolonizing process. But he himself is Zambian. This man is Incoloso, and he is mad that the national space program that he runs is being interfered with. The issue is, there is no Northern Rhodesian space program, but instead something much funnier. Incoloso was running an unofficial program in which he wished to compete with the US and the Soviet Union for space dominance, with Africa taking the center ground. This supposedly started because during Incoloso's first flight on a plane, he was annoyed that the pilot did not stop the plane and let him walk in the clouds, as one does. He recruited a group of teens, who he referred to as Afronauts, to try to prepare them for spaceflight. How did he do this? By rolling people in barrels to simulate G-force. Now, Incoloso also realized that he had to prepare the Afronauts for weightlessness, so he had them swinging on a tree in a tire. Now, what was the end goal of this mission? Incoloso believed that Mars was inhabited by primitive natives and wanted to set up a monastery there to show them the light. But the initial mission was just to send a 17-year-old cat into space for now. The Afronauts themselves were also fucking hilarious. Two of them went on a binge drinking session, never returned. One joined a traveling song and dance group, and the rest, Incoloso said, were too busy fucking. The one woman of the group got pregnant, went back to her parents, so he might not be wrong. Incoloso had claimed that this behavior was because the Afronauts let the fame of being Africa's first astronauts get to their head. Now, there are three prevailing theories to Incoloso's actions based on his life story. One was that he was broken by the torture of colonial forces, as he was an avid African liberationalist. Two, this whole thing was a shitpost to poke fun at the colonial forces trying to play with the bit of them thinking Africans were backwards people, with being missionaries to Mars being the best evidence of the whole thing being a bit. Or finally, it was a front for the National African Liberation Movement, as calling yourself a space program means you'll have some dangerous chemicals naturally. Like a quick note, this dude was incredibly intelligent. He got a law degree in the 80s, which is well after the space program ended, and he taught Latin all his life. So I'm leaning towards the second one being the truth, as I don't care how good of a bit you have, you can't just joke your way out of having actual explosives in your house and just saying it's for a space program. Supposedly, they did something similar with a Ugandan space program. Wiki, for some reason, says it's fake, but a dude went to Uganda and just talked to the people in the program, so that's kind of funny. So either this quote-unquote major scammed them, or they just made some random wiki nerd look dumb, as they both had similar programs. Either way, it's very funny. I personally lean more towards it being fake, though Idi Amin was pretty insane, so honestly I wouldn't doubt him seeing all of this and saying, yeah, this is a good idea. Just like it's a good idea for you to like and sub. I want to hit 500 by the end of the year. While that might sound crazy to say that, look at my schedule. There's probably one more video till Christmas. Why 500? Because that's when I get monetization. It might sound a little greedy, but this is a laptop I've been using and I don't know how much longer it's got. So yeah, you'll notice an uptick in quality in the videos if you like and sub, and also check out my other vids. Also, if you don't like my content in the future, just unsub. There have been several attempts from various African nations to make a pan-African space program, but projects failed due to logistical constraints and not stupidity, are not so funny, so moving on to Europe. Next is the Yahtzee Space Laser Project. The year is 1942, and the early construction of many modern-day missiles and the starting ground of the space race is being laid in Germany. There was an idea to replicate Archimedes' heat ray on a satellite and to use the sun as a gun. The project's name was Sonnegewehr Creative, and while at first glance you might be laughing, but if one were to take 9 square kilometers of metallic sodium, as originally planned, and reflect it onto a city, it just melts the city. Also, it can just boil off entire lakes. They claim oceans, but I doubt that. It's a permanently untrackable, at the time, city-wiping device. Now for people who are somewhat smart, they would have realized how much 9 square kilometers is. But even back then, they were only 50 to 100 years off completion. Variants of this have been suggested, such as satellite array forms. Realistically, one country has this in its back pockets. And remember, if it's stupid and despicable me enough, no one will have thought to write laws about it, therefore, it is not a war crime. Next, Big Bird was supposed to be on the Challenger. It's somewhat well known, so I'll skip over it. But essentially, people were debating who to put on the Challenger, and Big Bird was a suggestion, but it was scrapped due to logistical reasons. So while it might be funny to think it almost happened, it was nowhere close. Also, the Challenger was a disaster that was completely preventable. Also, the US shuttle program was total dog shit, and if we abandoned it after the Challenger, we would have been on Mars by now. Don't want to get too sidetracked, so I'll move on. The US once tried to nuke the moon. So, Sputnik gets launched, and the US is losing the space race rather badly. And for those who were asleep in history class, the space race was part of the Cold War, where the US and the Soviets were racing to put a man on the moon. Essentially petty squabbling from countries with the ability to destroy the world. So honestly, them doing this instead of proxy warring third world countries, probably for the better anyway. While it was a pure ego for the most part, there were also major security risks from one country dominating. What many believed would have been the next front warfare. So to not be embarrassed and show US might, the US had a plan. Nuke the fucking moon. That's it. The plan was to nuke the moon and have the mushroom cloud be visible from Earth. That was the whole plan. No studies, no nothing, just nuke it. What? I'm sorry, but even if we did go through with it, that's like the most pathetic thing ever. It's like those guys under a lifter or a fighter's comment section who just say, "Oh yeah, well you try something like that, I'll just shoot you." Though surface to space nuking was probably a good idea because the next invention. Cold War, space race. Same idea, other side. The Almaz program was a Soviet program designed to put military aircraft in space. The Soyuz 3 was a spaceship with such design. It was a space station with magnetic chests, among other various space station researchy things, but its most notable feature was a quote-unquote self-defense anti-aircraft gun mounted on the bottom. Now what was really funny about this is that the gun was in a fixed position, so you would have to turn the entire thing to do anything with it. And for those of you who are really good at science, yes, if it fired crosswise, it would just shoot itself. It ended up being a waste of time, as the space front of this theoretical war never happened. Though there were some test shots, maybe, nothing significant came of it. Though what I find really funny is that most nations have very good anti-satellite capabilities from Earth, so the gun is even more pointless. Speaking of the space race, let's talk about some of the janky stuff at the end. Apollo 11, Neil Armstrong. If you don't know this stuff, I really don't know what to tell you. As you know, on this mission, cameras were taken up there to broadcast this momentous occasion to the Earth. Well, what you might not know is that their signal was actually being received at a station in Australia. These people, however, had no way of actually converting it to a TV signal, so they did what all early speedrunners did, and just zoomed in on the TV itself. Which is why these non-restored versions are so fucking terrible. Another bit of historical nonsense was the Mars Orbiter. Nothing wrong with the spacecraft itself, however, in the project, the people used both imperial and metric systems. This might not seem like that big of a deal, as they are actual rocket scientists, and would be using the names in the units of measurement anyway, so they could probably just adjust it accordingly. Well, since it's in the video, they clearly fucking didn't, and the metric system people made an adjustment in meters per second instead of feet per second, which is around 3 times too much. So it crashed. Maybe rocket science isn't that hard if these guys can do it. NASA once tried to give the moon a moon. This was somewhat recent, but the asteroid redirect mission was essentially to capture a boulder from an asteroid, fly it into lunar orbit, and then study it while there. The mission was scrapped in 2018 because that's fucking stupid. Also, a fun callback is that Turkmenistan sent the Runhama into space, in low orbit, so that nothing could realistically take it out of the sky. Now to understand why that's funny, you would have to watch my Central Asia video, but given it's my most viewed video, you probably have. Now for those who are unaware, STEM majors like to maintain an aura of genius and intelligence, but if you were to ask them about their projects, oftentimes they will look you dead in the eyes and tell you they have no fucking clue why this works, and oftentimes don't even bother to question if it does. This happened with the Proton M, where the people couldn't figure out how to put on the accelerometer, and somehow brute forced it upside down. Don't think I have to explain why that went poorly. And here's some dumb stuff going on now. We were trying to melt the ice caps in Europa to get below the surface. This might not sound dumb, but they're testing it on Earth. So yes, NASA is actively melting the ice caps. There's a plan to have people live floating above the Venus poison clouds in a blimp. I have no clue why we would do that. There is a 100-year space project where some people are going to get on a spaceship and just dip from the solar system and fly for about 100 years. I don't know if you know this, but space is really dangerous. So good luck to them. One time a dude brought a gorilla suit into the ISS and chased a dude around in it, and that's really fucking funny. Anyway, that's the video. Like and sub so I can get money. Also, I'm probably going to be uploading less with school coming around, so be wary of that. See ya.